We've had a brief look at the track controls in some of the previous videos, but in this tutorial, we're going to have an in-depth look at what each item does in the track controls. Now we access the settings cog up the top right-hand corner, and we're going to select track controls. This will open up this menu to the left, this graphical user interface, which will change depending on which track we have selected. Under the top, we have the basic track settings, and this will give us the quantization, which we should already be familiar with if you've been doing the rest of this course. This will snap your notes on the software instruments to the nearest timing grid. We also have transposition, which isn't available if we go up to some of the smart instruments. But on a simple software instrument such as a sampler or a synth sound, let's have a look. So it's not on the smart bass, but if we select our simple synth sound, which is the keyboard instrument, we see that transposition appears again. That will give you the ability to move all of the notes on that particular track up or down in pitch by semitones or by octaves, which is 12 semitones. It's the same note, but higher, an octave higher. Let's have a listen to the instrument on this track. So if I change that via a semitone, that's no longer going to be matching the key of this song. That can be handy if all of your instruments are simple software instruments and you want to transpose the entire song. You can go through each one. I tend to use this mainly if I've recorded an instrument and I want it to be up an octave or down an octave. Down an octave would sound like this. So it's the same note, but an octave higher or an octave lower. We also have some extra recording settings. We've had a very brief look at this section. The merge recordings will allow you to basically loop record and add new notes into your performance. It'll keep your performance and it will just keep adding notes. This is very handy if you're creating a drum loop and you're playing it in. It will just keep adding them in. We also have this multi-take recordings right here. This will allow you to loop through your song and record different takes. So you can just keep jamming and you can go through 4 or 5 times and it will keep all 5 performances. You can then select the performance that you want to keep, and we'll have a look at that in a later video at how we actually do that. So I'm going to go back out. Those are the track settings. We also have the standard features that you find in every digital audio workstation, and these are vital to mixing your song, getting a nice balance. And we are fairly familiar with these. We have the track volume, so that will change the volume of the track you have selected. The track pan will put it to the left or the right speaker. This can be really good if you have lots of instruments and you want to pan some to the left, some to the right, and create a very nice stereo image in your mix, a nice wide mix. We also have the mute button, which will temporarily turn that track off and you won't hear anything. We also have the solo button right here, and you will only hear the sound that's on that track when it's selected. Let's go down to plugins and EQ. This is a macro view of the compressor and the equalizer. So up the top, we can give more compression or less compression. And then down the bottom, we have a very rudimentary equalizer. More treble, less treble, more bass, less bass. But these are actually macro controls, and we can fine tune the settings by clicking the plugins and EQ menu item. At the top, we have the compressor, and you'll see now that gives us all of the more fine-tuned details of a compressor. Now, I'm not really going to go into the topic of compression right here, but if you are familiar with compression, you can change the threshold. So as you pull that down, it will actually compress the signal more. As the audio will go over that threshold, the compressor will kick in. We can change the ratio of the compression. The default is 2.5 to 1. The attack is how quick the compression kicks in once the sound goes over the threshold. And this is the makeup gain. We can add gain in after we've compressed the signal. The mix down the bottom is how much of the compressed signal you hear and how much of the original signal you hear. But if you don't know much about compression, you can use it to fatten up a sound or make it stand out a little bit more in the mix. So if you have something like a lead line or a kick drum, you can dial that up a bit and it will kind of sit on top of your mix a bit more. It'll stand out, it'll cut through. If you go too crazy with the compression, it can have the opposite effect and it can kind of suck the life out of the sound, and overly compressed sounds are not very nice to listen to, especially if they're real world instruments. So the compressor, this single macro slider, will actually change these settings in here. You can see the mix is now at 100%. If I slide that down here, no compression, you'll see now the mix is at basically nothing. So the same applies for the equalizer. We will collapse this compressor and now we'll have a look at the equalizer. If you've used GarageBand on the Mac, you might be familiar with this. This is a simplified version. This is called a parametric equalizer. It's basically used to change the tone of a sound. I'm going to quickly solo this track so we can only hear this sound. And I'm going to show you what you can achieve with this EQ. So up the high end here, we can use this. If we click and hold this node, we can boost the high frequencies. We can cut the high frequencies. And this is what's known as a shelf EQ pattern. So everything above a certain frequency will be boosted. And if you're not really following along with these terms, I'll show you what I mean when we listen to it in just a moment. We can boost or cut the mid frequencies and we can choose the center frequency for that. This is a bell curve. And we also have a shelf EQ down the bottom. Let's have a listen to what happens when I cut the high frequencies. So the sound becomes slightly softer, takes some of the edge out of the sound. If I was to boost that, a lot more treble, it becomes a lot more buzzy and it cuts through a lot more. This is what boosting the mid frequencies might sound like, and I'm going to sweep around. So you can really mold the tone of the sound, or you can cut a problem frequency out. Now you can see I have this analyzer engaged, which is really handy. This gives you a visual representation of the frequencies that make up a sound. So if you're having trouble using your ears, you can switch this on and it will give you a visual clue as to where some of the frequencies are building up in this sound. So we can see there's a build up there around 500 Hertz. We might want to just cut that out a tiny bit to balance out the sound a little bit more. So that's how you use this fairly basic equalizer, but it can be really handy, especially if you want to soften. I'm going to just soften the top end of this actually. I'm going to keep those mids. Let's have a listen to that. There we go. I like that. Okay, so the last area that we can look at on the track controls is the master effects. And we have used some of this echo and reverb on some of our sounds already. If I was to get rid of this echo and reverb, you'd hear the sound becomes a lot drier and there's no kind of ambience to it. So this is more reverb, more echo. You can actually change the master effects. So if I click on the master effects, we can change the type of echo, but be warned, if you change it here, it will change it for all the other tracks as well. So let's try some of these different echoes. Let's try a quarter note echo and listen to what that sounds like. Let's try a triplet. Dark eighth note. I like that. That's a good one. Okay, so we can also change the reverb. If I go back to the master effects, let me go here and collapse that echo menu, and we can choose a different reverb. We have the default reverb now, but we can do something like a club, large hall, medium hall. Let's try a cathedral. This will be a lot bigger and more ambient. Okay, let's try a club. You can hear that has a shorter reverb tail. The reverb time is slower. Let's try Moon Dome. I'm assuming this is going to be really big. Wow, that reverb tail sounds like it's about 10 seconds long to me. Okay, so I'm going to dial these effects down and let's have a listen to how these have affected our entire mix. I'm going to have to scroll up to take this track off of mute. Let's have a listen now. Okay, because I've changed that master effect to a really big, this Moon Dome sound, it's kind of washed out my entire mix. So I'm just going to switch that back to Cathedral, see if that sounds a bit better. That's much better. That suits the track a lot more. So those are all the features of the track controls.